Travis Scott is by far one of the most iconic rappers in the game. His unique sound, persona, and brand have made him one of the hottest artists since 2015. But one key thing acts as the backbone to all of Travis Scott's success: the insane production behind all of his songs. So in today's video, we're going to take a deep dive into all the crazy production techniques used across Travis Scott's biggest albums and take you inside the dark, twisted world of Travis Scott's production. Travis Scott's production is often the standout part of his songs, and he even admits this in an interview.
I think with production, man, I pay like very close attention, because like that's like my favorite thing in like music. I gotta just make sure I have like just that ill shit niggas just can't get.
And there's a few main things that are consistent across all of his production. All of his beats take you to a different world. They're psychedelic, dark, and somehow they feel futuristic while also feeling nostalgic and vintage at the same time. Most of his beats are typically sitting anywhere from 130 to 150 BPM, somewhere in that range. And he has some key instruments that are used in some of his most iconic productions: synths, bells, distorted bass, hard-hitting drums, and guitar. There are countless songs where Travis uses a guitar, but there are a few that really capture this psychedelic, almost drunk guitar sound that Travis is known for. So to build a foundation for our beat, I wanted to go with that dark guitar kind of Travis sound. So I grabbed my guitar and my phone and I just recorded a simple idea into my voice memos app. Now this is sounding decent, but it's definitely not screaming Travis Scott to me right now. And that brings me to one of the most important parts of Travis's production: effects and processing. For example, if you take a listen to the original sample on Antidote by Travis Scott, it didn't feel super gritty and dark like it does in his record. But after Wonder Girl and Eastbound flipped it with some filters and effects, it came out much darker, grittier, and it feels like it's part of Travis's world that he creates with his music. So to level up that simple guitar idea I just recorded, let's get into processing. All right, so the first thing I did is I took this guitar recording and I just pitched it up an octave. So now it sounds like this. Definitely a little bit harsh, but we're gonna add some more effects that are really gonna make this cool. So I went into Logic and they've got guitar amp presets over here. So I grabbed this Mars Retrograde preset right here. And if we turn on those effects, we get this. This sounds sick, but it's definitely a little off time and still really harsh. So I grabbed this Cymatics Deja Vu plugin, which is half timing the melody. So it's pitching it down an octave and making it play half as fast. I put it on this 1/4 setting with the smooth turned up. It sounds like this. So I bounced all of that into one new audio file, and then I added some reverb, another guitar amp plugin, and an essential plugin if you want to get this weird, trippy Travis Scott kind of sound: H-Delay. And on the settings on this, you're going to want to make sure that you turn the dry and wet down, turn the feedback up quite a bit, mess with this filter right here so you're actually EQing the delay sound. And then the key to getting that weird kind of delay that Travis Scott uses in all of his songs is to mess with the modulation right here. This is actually messing with the pitch of the delay, which gives it a super trippy vibe. Finally, to finish the processing on the guitar, I took some inspiration from Can't Say off of Astroworld. If you listen closely, you can tell that it's a warped guitar melody that's been resampled and has this chopped stop and go kind of effect. So I took our guitar recording with all the effects and bounced it down into a new audio file, and then I chopped the audio every half bar. After that, I just dragged the audio files a little bit to the left, creating these little gaps of silence, and this creates that chopped, resampled kind of effect. From here, I wanted to fill the melody out a little bit, and I really liked the dark ambient bells on Outside. So I went into my Elements of Trap Analog Lab bank and grabbed this Fantasy Bell preset, and I put down a simple pattern that I then half sped so that it fits nicely with the guitar, and I got this. Now, I wanted to bring in an iconic sound to Travis Scott's production: a synth bass. Deep synth basses are a huge part of Travis Scott's sound. Typically, they're used for breakdowns, which we're going to get into later in this video, but in songs like Sicko Mode and Franchise, they use a gritty synth bass as the main bass for the song.
Made this here with all the ice on in the booth at the gate. Yeah.
And those basses have this distorted, punchy, almost 808-like kind of sound. So I found a similar sound on my computer and put down this super simple bass line. We'll dive into this more a bit later, but the vintage retro kind of aesthetic is a huge part of Travis's sound. So to enhance that feeling without adding anything too crazy, I added a vinyl noise texture just to give off that old record vibe, like maybe this was a sample off of a vinyl. And now that that's done, the first section of this melody is finished. However, a huge reason that Travis Scott's production is so amazing is because it tells a story. I think to songs like 90210, The Ends, or even songs like Sicko Mode that have so much going on in the production that really feels like you're part of an experience rather than just a normal 2 or 3 minute song. And part of telling a story with the production involves taking out and putting in new sounds to make the beat feel like it's progressing and it's not just the same thing looped over and over. So for the next part, I wanted the beat to build up into something more big and epic sounding for a hook section. And the perfect inspiration for this anthemic rage kind of feeling is one of the best songs off his latest album, Utopia. This song had the whole rap community in a chokehold when it first dropped, and if you were one of the lucky people who got to see it performed live, you already know how contagious the energy on this beat is. And one key reason that this beat has so much energy are those bright synth chords. So to replicate this feeling for our beat, I grabbed this aggressive saw synth from Alchemy, which is a stock Logic plugin by the way, and I put down these simple chords. These chords are super simple, but this chord progression has been used on countless Travis Scott songs, from experimental songs like 90210 to more typical trap songs like Houston Fornication. So let's break down those go-to Travis Scott chords a little bit more. All right, so to make this chord progression, it's actually super easy. So we have this C minor chord, which starts with a C, and then a minor chord has 2 spaces in between the middle note and the root note, up here to an E flat, and then 3 spaces to the top note, finishing off on that G. And then it moves up to this chord, which is a C sharp major chord, starting with that C sharp. And then for a major chord, instead of that 2 space gap right there, you're gonna have a 3 space gap and then a 2 space gap on top. And then we go to an F minor chord right here. But if all that kind of just sounded like a bunch of nonsense to you, let me just show you how to remake it really quick. So what you wanna do is put on the scale quantize right here. I've got the key in F minor, and I'm gonna build this first chord by hitting C, and then I'll skip 1 note that's in the scale. Up here, skip this note that's in the scale. And then I'm just going to copy this over, and then I'm just going to pitch it up 1. Then I'm going to take this middle note, pitch that up, copy and paste it over 1 more time. And then on the second part, I just take this, put it up 5 semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then take this high note and transpose it down an octave. And just like that, the chord progression is made. All right, so now that we got the base of the chords down, there's one technique we're missing that's going to bring these chords to the next level: pitch modulation. And before I lose you with that, it might sound a little bit confusing, but that's pretty much just a fancy way for saying that the pitch is bending. So it's like sliding up and down in pitch. This pitch bending really adds this trippy, weird, psychedelic sound to Travis Scott's music, and you can hear a perfect example of it on the chords on Fiend. So I went into the chord MIDI and made them slide by opening up the automation clip in the bottom left corner, selecting pitch bend, and then making the chord slide down before the next chord hits. So I could definitely leave this as is for the hook section, but on one of my favorite songs, Nightcrawler, there's this super ear-grabbing synth lead that plays throughout the song. And although the lead I'm gonna add doesn't exactly sound like that, I wanted to add something to add some more ear candy and give some more energy to this section of the beat. So I copied the chord MIDI onto a monophonic lead sound, so it's only playing 1 note at a time. And I also copied over the pitch modulation and got this. This synth section is adding a ton of energy to this beat, and it's also making it feel more futuristic. But like I mentioned earlier, a really cool part of Travis's production is that he kind of combines this modern futuristic sound with more vintage aesthetics and inspiration, making it feel futuristic and nostalgic at the same time. So I went back in to build a 3rd section of this melody using another key instrument to Travis Scott's sound: bells. So, taking some inspiration from the songs you just heard, I grabbed 2 Bell Analog Lab presets from my Elements of Trap kit that I actually recorded myself on my real Mellotron keyboard, which is an iconic instrument used by Cubeats, who have produced countless songs for Travis Scott. More on Cubeats in just a second, but let's listen to those bells really quick. These bells sound solid already, but as I just mentioned, Cubeats has produced countless classics for Travis Scott, arguably helping shape his sound into what it is today. And a huge part of Cubeats' iconic sound is that vintage processed vibe. So to take these bells to the next level and make them feel more vintage, I added the Cymatics Origin plugin, which is pretty much acting like an old tape machine, detuned a little bit, the pitch is wobbling, and also adding a little bit of saturation. And after that, I added a trippy delay preset from the H910 Harmonizer plugin, which is an amazing plugin for getting that Cubeats vintage detuned kind of sound. Next up, another sound that instantly gives that Travis Scott synthy kind of vibe are synth arps. So I went into the Elements of Trap kit and I grabbed these synth arp phrases and put it on top of the bells. And to finish off the third section of the melody, I brought back in that distorted guitar that we made earlier, but I half sped it to kind of create more space so that the bells can take up the high-end frequencies and shine a little bit more. Then I also brought back in the original guitar recording from my iPhone without all of those crazy guitar amps and distortion plugins, pitched that up an octave with some vintage processing, and this is what I got. And now the melody is finished. So now it's time to get into Travis's favorite part of his production.
The drums. The drums. I don't give a fuck about nothing else.
But before we get into adding some hard-hitting drums, if you need some next-level sounds to inspire you and give your beats a more unique and interesting sound, you've got to check out this Elements of Trap kit. I spent thousands of dollars in over 6 months working with session musicians to put together over 2,000 insane trap samples. This kit has crazy phrases with live violin, real flute, real guitar, full melody loops, those presets that you just heard in the loop that we were making, and a ton of hard-hitting drums that we're going to be using to make the drums in our beat. So as a thank you for watching this video and supporting me, you can use the code Travis50 at checkout and you'll get 50% off, and it'll be the first link in the description down below. But anyways, back into it. Travis Scott's melodies help build the world and the vibe of his tracks, but his drums are what makes the songs hit and give them that rager kind of energy that Travis Scott needs in a song. And if you didn't already know, Travis Scott actually got his start in the industry by producing for huge artists like Jay-Z and Kanye West, and he was always known for his unique and insane drums. So we definitely need to make sure we nail the drums to get his sound down right. And to start out, one of my favorite new-ish beats that Travis has got on recently is the one on Franchise. If you listen to the drums, you can hear how there's a clap and a snare that are kind of alternating when they're playing, creating this kind of call and response feeling. Doing this makes the drums more interesting to the listener because it's not just playing the same exact sound every single bar. Travis Scott's production has a ton of tiny details that a lot of people might not notice, so don't be afraid to add some little subtle stuff like that to make your beats more interesting. Anyways, to start off our drums, I put down 2 snares, with one playing every single bar and then another one that comes in every other bar. Next up, we need some trappy hi-hats to give this beat some more energy, and while we could go super crazy on these hi-hats with a bunch of rolls and pauses and stuff like that, after listening to countless Travis songs, I've noticed that a lot of his hi-hats are really simple, with some of them just having a straight up 2-step hi-hat pattern.
For this life I cannot change. It's not electric, this shit gassed up. Can you catch it? The Virgil jet ski wanna sell, he sending texts, ain't sending kites. Yeah, he say keep that on lock.
On Butterfly Effect specifically, you can hear a signature technique that Murda Beats uses on his hi-hats. Murda went in and shifted the hi-hats just a little bit off beat, and this helps create more groove and swing in the drums. So I did something similar. I put down a simple 2-step hi-hat pattern and then shifted them just a little bit to the left to make them off time, added an open hat, and got this. Another thing Murda Beats did on Butterfly Effect is add a hard-hitting bouncy kick pattern. And if you listen to the kicks right in the beginning of the pattern, you can hear that signature boom boom. You'll see what I mean.
For this life I cannot change.
I wanted to add a hard-hitting kick like that, so I drew in a pattern messing with the velocities and those double kick hits that I was talking about, and I paired it with a hard-hitting spins 808 to get this. Another super important producer who works with Travis Scott all the time is OZ, and he's produced classics from Sicko Mode to Highest in the Room, and recently I Know. And a huge part of OZ's signature sound with Travis Scott is his unique bounce and percussion. Take a listen to I Know and try to listen for the laser effect and the cowbell.
Tell me if you still love her.
As you can tell, those drums have a super dope bounce, and those unique percussions and sound effects really add to that feeling. So I took some inspiration and I added a laser sound effect and a cowbell into this beat and got this. And at this point, I feel like the drums were just missing a little bit of grittiness. And I really liked the bass that we did on the melody earlier that kind of sounded similar to Sicko Mode and Franchise. So I EQ'd out some of the lows on that bass so that the 808 could take up the low end, but the high end character frequencies of the bass were also there at the same time. So I layered those two together and got this. Drums are super solid right now, but for that Fiend style section with those big anthemic synth chords, I kind of wanted to switch up the drums just a little bit, and they did something super interesting with the kicks and snares on Fiend, which I'll touch on in just a second. But one cool little Easter egg on the drums on Fiend is that they used the same iconic snare sample that Kanye used on Good Morning. It's no secret that Kanye West is a huge influence on Travis Scott. So seeing him use that same iconic snare rimshot kind of sound was just a cool moment in that beat. So I added that Good Morning snare into the beat, letting it play once every 4 bars. But before I play you that, if we listen again to the drums on Fiend, you can hear that they actually deleted one of the snare hits and replaced it with a kick. Taking away that snare right there and then replacing it with a kick just adds a completely new bounce and feeling to these drums, and I thought it would sound super fire in our beat. Moving on, I wanted to switch up the 808 in the bass for the next section of the beat, and I took some inspiration from the bouncy, plucky synth basses that you can hear on songs like R.I.P. Screw and Impossible.
Late night, you know the deal on a late night.
So I went into the Elements of Trap Analog Lab Bank and I found this Dawn Pluck, which has that cool plucky synth kind of sound. So that's sounding pretty sick. And although Travis has a ton of songs using these more modern drums that we're using in this beat, a huge part of his earlier sound were these distorted, dirty drum breaks. So I thought it would be cool to add some live drums into this beat, distort the shit out of them, and kind of use them almost as more of a texture and perk loop instead of the main drums for the song. Kind of similar to how they used a live hi-hat sample on I Can Tell.
I can tell, baby.
So as you can tell, those live hi-hats sound super warped and pitched down. And also, I love those snare rolls that finish off every pattern on I Can Tell. So I brought in a live drum break and a live snare fill from my upcoming Vintage Essentials kit, pitched them down and distorted the fuck out of them. And finally, for a transition and just a little bit of ear candy, I added this creepy riser sound and put a crazy pitch modulated delay from H Delay to create this super trippy, eerie kind of texture. At this point, the beat could 100% be finished, but that's not like Travis. Travis is constantly pushing his production to new heights and going balls to the wall to make the final product as good as it can possibly be. And one of the most iconic ways that Travis does this is with the help of his right-hand man, Mike Dean. Without Mike Dean, there is no doubt that Travis Scott's sound would not be what it is today. Mike Dean mixes and masters pretty much all of Travis's records, but he's not just a glorified mix and master engineer, he's a legendary producer. And when it comes to Travis Scott's and Mike Dean's collabs, one main thing comes to my mind: the legendary Mike Dean synth outro. But before we add that, if you've learned anything from this video so far, just hit the subscribe button so I can keep making more videos like this. I appreciate you guys watching. Anyways, if we take a listen to some of Mike Dean's best synth outros for Travis Scott, you can hear a few main elements that pop up over and over again. First, a deep synth bass. Second, a synth lead. Third, some bright synth chords. And finally, some distorted and warped live drum breaks. So to start off our synth breakdown, I went back into my drum break kit and I brought back in those same breaks that I used in the beat before, as well as a more distorted heavy break. And I pitched all of them down with some distortion, filtering, and even some halftime, and I got this. From here, I wanted to continue building the foundation for the synth outro with the thick synth bass that Mike Dean always uses with Travis Scott. And that's already sounding sick, but if we want to make it more ear-grabbing and really have that Mike Dean kind of feeling, we need some synth leads. And I really love the leads on the outro to the Scotts. If you listen closely, you can hear that there's one synth playing in the left ear and one in the right ear, and it's kind of creating this call and response kind of effect, and it sounds sick. So I grabbed 2 instances of a synth lead preset from Analog Lab, drowned them both in a ton of analog H delay, and made sure to pan one left and one right. And then I just freestyled on my keyboard and played some lead lines on this outro. If you were listening closely to those leads, you can also hear that same pitch bending sound effect that we used on the chords earlier in this video, and it also sounds pretty similar to the lead on Highest in the Room. Anyways, finally, to finish this off, I added some bright synth chords similar to the ones on Sirens, and they come in with a bit of a kind of stabby intro part before the main long chords come in. And this little triplet stab idea came from the stabby lead that Mike Dean did on the Scotts outro, and I think that this tiny little detail really just helps the outro transition into the next part with the chords. With that, the beat is finished. So let's take a listen and let me know in the comments down below if you think I did justice to Travis Scott's insane production. A nasty guitar. Section. Here we go. Let's just switch up. So good. If you want to learn why all your favorite rappers are obsessed with using beats from Tay Keith, click this video right here.